The 50th floor of the Obsidian Group existed in a different atmosphere than the rest of Atlanta. Up here, the air was thinner, colder, the kind of cold that comes from money, power, and men who've learned to bury their hearts under volcanic rock. Manshik stood at the head of the boardroom table, his reflection caught in the polished black surface. He was minutes away from signing the merger that would cement his legacy as the Ghost King, untouchable, unreachable, unstoppable. The heavy doors swung open. Time stopped. Kamara Wesby walked in, and the entire room held its breath. She wasn't the woman who'd been dragged out into the Georgia rain 7 months ago, her belongings scattered across wet pavement. She was something else now, something sharper. The crimson blazer she wore wasn't just clothing, it was armor. Her curls weren't just styled, they were a crown, and the swell of her belly, 7 months round and undeniable, wasn't just a pregnancy, it was a declaration of war. The merger team exchanged glances. Manshik's second-in-command moved a stand, but Manshik raised a hand to stop him. His eyes were locked on her. Only her. Kamara. Her name left his lips like he was testing whether she was real. She moved toward him with the grace of someone who knew she'd already won. "I believe there's been a mistake in your seating arrangements." "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I'm here to correct an oversight." She placed a leather folder on the volcanic rock between them. "It seems someone forgot to send me my shareholder invitation. Understandable. It's hard to track down a ghost." His jaw clenched. "You have no shares." "Actually," she said, opening the folder to reveal page after page of legal documents, "I have the majority. While you were busy erasing me, I was busy becoming you. Every shell company, every offshore account, every piece of this empire you built in the shadows, I own it now." The second-in-command's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Kamara's gaze never left Manshik's. "Or did you all just underestimate the woman who knew every secret in this building?" Manshik's hand reached toward her, toward the curve where his child was growing. "Kamara, the baby—" She stepped back sharply, her eyes flashing. "You don't get to touch him. You erased me, remember? You froze my accounts. You had me escorted out like I was disposable, so no. You don't get to play father now." The room was suffocating. Manshik could feel his empire cracking beneath his feet, could see the Ghost King title slipping through his fingers, but all he could focus on was her. The woman he'd destroyed, the woman who'd just destroyed him back. One question echoed in his mind. How did she do this? But to understand how a king fell and a ghost rose, to understand the 8 moves she made in the shadows while he sat on his throne, we need to go back. Back to the night he made the choice that would cost him everything. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the most dangerous kind of love, the kind that doesn't die when you try to kill it. Before we rewind to the night that started it all, I need to hear from you. Are you Team Kamara's revenge or Team Manshik's redemption? Drop your city below and hit subscribe. Because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about power, love, and survival. 3 years earlier, Kamara Wesby had walked into the Obsidian Group wearing a navy suit 2 sizes too big and carrying a resume that didn't mention she'd put herself through business school while working 3 jobs. Manshik had looked up from his desk only once during her interview, his dark eyes sweeping over her with the kind of assessment that made most people crumble. She'd held his gaze until he looked away first. He hired her on the spot. What he didn't say was that he'd been watching her for months. She'd applied to 7 positions in his organization, each rejection signed by his second-in-command without Manshik ever seeing her file. But Manshik saw everything. He'd pulled her application himself after noticing a pattern in the company's offshore accounts. Someone had been skimming fractions of pennies from transactions, amounts so small they'd go unnoticed for years. When he traced the discovery back to an entry-level audit Kamara had flagged in a temp position, he knew exactly what kind of mind she had. The kind that could see through walls. The kind that could see through him. Their relationship began in silence. Man-Shik didn't speak unless words were necessary, and Kamara learned to read the language of his stillness. The way his jaw tightened when someone lied in a meeting. The nearly imperceptible pause before he signed documents that would ruin lives. The single finger he'd tap against his desk when he was calculating something 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. She became fluent in him. Late nights in the office became their routine. The rest of the building would empty by 8, but the 50th floor remained lit until dawn. Man-Shik would work through contracts while Kamara organized the chaos of his empire into something that looked legitimate on paper. They never touched, never crossed the invisible line that separated employer from employee, but the air between them hummed with something neither acknowledged. Until the night she found the hidden file. It was buried deep in an encrypted server, protected by 7 layers of security that would have stopped anyone else. But Kamara had spent months studying his patterns, learning the architecture of his mind. She broke through in 4 hours. The file contained names, addresses, photographs of people who disappeared from Atlanta over the past decade. And at the center of it all, a single word in Korean she had to translate: ghost. She should have walked away, should have deleted her digital footprint and disappeared before he realized what she'd found. Instead, she printed a single page and left it on his desk before she went home that night. When she arrived the next morning, Man-Shik was standing at the window, the printed page in his hand. He didn't turn around when she entered. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said quietly. "I know." Kamara set her bag down, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Are you going to kill me?" The question hung in the air for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then Man-Shik turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than ice in his eyes. "If I wanted you dead, you would have never made it to the elevator." "Then what do you want?" He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she could smell the bergamot and cedar of his cologne, could see the faint scar along his jawline she'd never noticed before. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. "I want you to understand what you've just made yourself a part of," he said, his voice dropping to something darker, something honest. "And I want you to choose." "Choose what?" "Whether you're in or out. Because once you're in, there's no going back." Kamara should have chosen out. Should have walked away from the man whose file read like a horror novel, whose hands had signed death warrants, whose empire was built on secrets and silence. But she looked into his eyes and saw something she recognized, loneliness that mirrored her own. "I'm in," she whispered. Man-Shik's hand finally made contact, his fingers brushing along her jawline with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "Then I need you to know the truth about who I am. All of it." 6 months before the erasure, the council came to Atlanta. They didn't announce their arrival. They simply appeared in Man-Shik's office at 3 in the morning, like smoke taking human form. 5 men in tailored suits, each representing a different faction of the Korean underworld's American operations. Man-Shik received them in the dark, the city lights behind him casting his shadow across the volcanic rock desk. Kamara stood in the corner. Her presence barely acknowledged but absolutely noted. The eldest among them, a man named Park Jin-woo, spoke in Korean. Kamara had been taking lessons for 4 months, but he spoke too quickly for her to catch more than fragments. She caught 3 words clearly: marriage, alliance, necessity. Man-Shik responded in English, forcing them to meet him in her language. "I'm not interested in arranged marriages." Park Jin-woo's smile was thin as paper. "It's not a request, Man-Shik. It's a requirement. The San Francisco faction won't sign the territorial agreement unless there's a blood bond. You marry Lee Mincio, or you lose the West Coast. Then I lose the West Coast. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Another council member leaned forward. You're willing to sacrifice $100 million in annual revenue over a marriage? I'm willing to sacrifice anything that threatens the integrity of this operation. Manshik's gaze didn't waver. Mincio's father has been laundering cartel money through his shipping companies. If I marry into that family, I inherit his enemies and his federal investigation. I don't need either. You're being reckless, Park Jin-woo said, and recklessness gets people killed. Then kill me. Manshik stood, his hands flat on the desk. But I won't be manipulated into a marriage that compromises everything I've built here. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Park Jin-woo stood as well. You have 3 months to reconsider. After that, we'll consider your refusal an act of betrayal against the organization. They left the same way they arrived, silently, like shadows retreating at dawn. When the door closed, Kamara finally spoke. They're going to force your hand. I know. Manshik didn't turn around. Which means I have 3 months to make you disappear. She felt her stomach drop. What? They'll use you against me. His voice was hollow. The council has already started investigating everyone in my inner circle. When they realize what you mean to me, they'll use you as leverage. They'll hurt you to make me comply. So your solution is to fire me? My solution is to make you invisible before they can touch you. He finally turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes made him look almost human. I'm going to stage your termination. Make it look like you stole from the company, create a paper trail that destroys your credibility, freeze your accounts so you can't be tracked, and have you escorted out publicly. It has to look real, Kamara. Real enough that the council believes I don't care about you. And then what? Then you disappear for 6 months. I'll set up an offshore account in a name they can't trace, give you enough to start over somewhere far from here. When the council loses interest, when the marriage pressure passes, you come back. Kamara shook her head slowly. You're asking me to let you destroy my reputation and vanish from my own life because you won't stand up to 5 old men in suits. I'm asking you to trust me. He crossed the room, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I'm asking you to let me protect you the only way I know how, by erasing me, by keeping you alive. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she wasn't some helpless piece in his chess game, that she'd survived worse than the council's threats. But she saw the fear hiding behind his control, the terror of losing the one person who'd managed to slip past his defenses. There's another way, she said quietly. There isn't. What if I told you I'm already 3 steps ahead of your council? Kamara reached into her blazer and pulled out a flash drive. What if I told you that for the past 6 months I've been building a contingency plan? One that doesn't require me to disappear, doesn't require you to marry someone you don't love, and doesn't require either of us to bow to men who think they own us. Manshik stared at the flash drive like it was a grenade. What did you do? What you taught me to do. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. I saw the game 3 moves ahead. Now let me show you how we win. The flash drive contained everything. Shell companies Kamara had been quietly establishing for months, each one buying fractional shares of Obsidian Group subsidiaries using money she'd skimmed from Manshik's own slush funds, amounts so small he'd never noticed them missing. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands registered to names that didn't exist. Stock options hidden in the fine print of contracts the council had already signed, giving her silent partnership rights that wouldn't activate for another 3 years. Manshik sat at his desk reviewing the files, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, there was something new in his eyes, something that looked almost like pride. "You've been robbing me," he said. "I've been protecting us," Kamara corrected. "Every penny I took, I invested back into your empire through channels the council can't trace. In 3 years, when these stocks mature, I'll own enough of the Obsidian Group to block any decision you don't want to make, including marriage. They'll kill you when they find out. They won't find out, because you're going to help me stay invisible." She leaned against the edge of his desk, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "You're going to fire me exactly like you planned. You're going to make it look real, make it hurt, make everyone believe I betrayed you. But instead of disappearing to hide, I'm going to disappear to build. I'll use these 6 months to consolidate every company I've created, to buy up every debt the council members owe, to become powerful enough that when I return, I'm not your secretary anymore." "What are you then?" "Your equal." The word hung between them like a promise and a threat. "Your partner. The one person they can't use against you because I'll be just as dangerous as you are." Man-Shik stood slowly, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. His hand lifted to her face, fingers tracing the curve of her jaw with a tenderness that contradicted every ruthless thing she knew about him. "This is insane," he whispered. "This is survival. If it fails, it won't." Kamara placed her hand over his, holding it against her cheek. "I've spent 3 years learning to think like you, Man-Shik. I know how to disappear. I know how to become a ghost. And when I come back, we'll both be untouchable." He leaned down until his forehead rested against hers, their breath mingling in the space between them. "I've never let anyone this close," he admitted. "Never trusted anyone enough to show them everything. I know. If you betray me, I won't." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Because you're not the only one who's lonely, Man-Shik. You're not the only one who's spent years building walls to keep people out. I'm in this with you, all the way to the end." He kissed her then. Not gently, but with the desperation of a man who'd spent too long denying himself what he wanted. Kamara melted into him, her fingers tangling in his hair. Her body pressed against his as 3 years of unspoken tension finally found release. When they broke apart, both breathless, Man-Shik rested his hand over her stomach. "There's one more piece to the plan," he said quietly. "Something we haven't discussed." "What?" "Before you disappear, we go to the clinic. We preserve what we have in case the council's threats become real. In case something happens to one of us. We make sure that no matter what, there's a future." Kamara understood what he was asking. IVF, embryos stored in secret, a biological insurance policy that would give them both something to fight for if everything else burned down. "The clinic appointment is tomorrow," she whispered. "I already made it." Man-Shik's smile was rare and beautiful and heartbreaking. "You really do think 3 steps ahead. I learned from the best." 2 weeks later, Kamara Wesby was fired from the Obsidian Group in the most public, humiliating way possible. Man-Shik had her dragged from her office by security while the entire 50th floor watched. He accused her of embezzling funds, of corporate espionage, of betraying his trust after everything he'd given her. She didn't fight back, didn't defend herself. She let them destroy her reputation, let them freeze her accounts, let them escort her through the lobby like a criminal, while employees whispered and pointed. The Georgia rain was waiting for her outside, cold and unforgiving. Kamara stood on the sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on her back and a prepaid phone hidden in her bra. She looked up at the 50th floor windows, knowing Man-Shik was watching, knowing this was the price of survival. She disappeared into the rain, letting the city swallow her whole. What Man-Shik didn't know, what even Kamara didn't know yet, was that she was already carrying his child. The IVF had worked faster than expected. The embryo had taken root days before the erasure, growing silently while she played her role as the disgraced secretary. And what neither of them knew was that Manshik's second-in-command, the man he trusted like a brother, had been the one feeding information to the council all along. The marriage ultimatum, the pressure to erase Kamara, the timeline that forced their hand, it had all been orchestrated by someone inside the organization. Someone who wanted Manshik isolated and vulnerable. Someone who was about to make his move. Kamara spent the first month in a motel outside Savannah, using cash she'd stashed in safety deposit boxes across the South. She spent her days building the ghost companies, making calls from burner phones, moving money through channels so complex even forensic accountants couldn't track them. She spent her nights being violently sick, her body rejecting the pregnancy hormones while her mind refused to acknowledge what was happening. It took 6 weeks before she finally took the test. 2 pink lines that changed everything. She sat on the bathroom floor of a motel that cost $40 a night and laughed until she cried. Manshik had wanted to preserve their future. Instead, she was living it, growing it, protecting it with every move she made. The Ghost Protocol wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about giving their child a world where power couldn't be stolen, where love wasn't a weakness, where a black woman carrying a Korean man's baby didn't have to hide in the shadows. It was about rewriting every rule that had tried to break them. Kamara pulled out her laptop and opened the encrypted files. She had 7 months to finish what she'd started. 7 months to become powerful enough that when she walked back into the Obsidian group, she wouldn't be asking for permission. She'd be claiming her throne. Back in the boardroom, 7 months after the erasure, Manshik's lawyers were scrambling. 3 of them hunched over tablets, fingers flying across screens while sweat beaded on their foreheads. The head attorney, a woman named Patricia who'd never lost a case in 20 years, looked up with the expression of someone who'd just watched their world tilt sideways. "She's legitimate," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every document is ironclad, every signature notarized, every transaction legal." Manshik's second-in-command, Daejung, slammed his hand on the table. "That's impossible. She was terminated 7 months ago. Her accounts were frozen. How could she have—" "Because I never stopped working." Kamara's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. She moved around the table slowly, deliberately, her heels clicking against marble in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. "While you all thought I was broken, I was building. While you assumed I was hiding, I was hunting. Every shell company Manshik created to hide his empire, I bought them back. Every offshore account he thought was secure, I infiltrated them. Every single piece of this organization that you thought belonged to him actually belongs to me now." She stopped directly across from Manshik, the volcanic rock desk the only barrier between them. Her brown eyes held his dark ones without flinching, without apology, without fear. 51%, she said softly. "I own 51% of the Obsidian Group, which means every decision made in this room from this moment forward goes through me first." Manshik's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath his skin. "You've been planning this since before I fired you." "I've been planning this since the day I met you." Kamara pulled out a chair at the head of the table, his chair, and sat down like a queen claiming her throne. "You taught me to see 3 moves ahead. I saw 10. The room erupted. Executives shouted over each other, demanding explanations, threatening legal action, invoking board bylaws that Kamara had already memorized and exploited. But she didn't look at any of them. She only looked at Manshik, watching the realization dawn across his features. She'd won. Not just the company, not just the power. She'd won the only game that mattered. She'd beaten him at his own strategy. Daejung moved toward her, his hand reaching inside his jacket where everyone knew he kept a weapon. "This is corporate theft. You're not walking out of here with, 'Touch that gun, and you'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison.'" Kamara's voice remained calm, almost bored. I have recordings of every illegal transaction you've made in the past 5 years. Every bribe, every threat, every body you've helped dispose of. The FBI would love to hear them. Daejung froze, his face draining of color. Sit down, Manshik said quietly, not to Kamara, to his second-in-command, to the man he'd trusted like a brother. Daejung sat. Manshik stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with movements that were too controlled, too precise. Everyone out. Manshik, you can't seriously... Out. The single word carried enough weight to make 15 executives scramble for the door. Even Patricia gathered her tablets and fled, leaving her expensive briefcase behind in her haste. Within 30 seconds, only 3 people remained in the boardroom. Manshik, Kamara, and Daejung, who looked like he was calculating his odds of surviving the next 10 minutes. You too, Manshik said, his gaze never leaving Kamara's face. I think I should stay, Daejung replied, for your protection. Kamara laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. You mean for your protection, because you're the one who orchestrated all of this, aren't you, Daejung? You're the one who forged the council's orders. You're the one who convinced Manshik I was dangerous. You're the one who wanted me gone because you knew I was smart enough to see what you were really doing. Daejung's hand moved toward his weapon again. This time, Manshik moved faster. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed Daejung by the throat, and slammed him against the floor-to-ceiling windows hard enough to make the glass shudder. The city sprawled 50 floors below them, Atlanta spread out like a glittering web of lights and shadows. How long? Manshik's voice was quiet, deadly. How long have you been stealing from me? Daejung gasped for air, his fingers clawing at Manshik's wrist. I was protecting the organization. She was making you weak, making you human. That's not who you are, Manshik. You're the Ghost King. You don't fall in love. You don't... Manshik tightened his grip. Answer the question. 2 years. The confession came out strangled. I've been skimming for 2 years. Small amounts. Amounts you'd never notice because she was handling the books. But then she started getting too close, started asking questions I couldn't answer. So, I had to remove her. By turning me against her. By saving you from yourself. Manshik released him suddenly, letting Daejung collapse to the floor, coughing and gasping. You're right about one thing. I am the Ghost King. Which means I know exactly how to make people disappear. He pulled his phone from his pocket and made a single call. Spoke 3 words in Korean. Hung up. Within minutes, 2 men in dark suits entered the boardroom. They didn't ask questions. They simply lifted Daejung from the floor and escorted him out while he screamed threats and promises and apologies that no one was listening to. The door closed. Silence settled over the room like ash after a fire. Manshik turned to face Kamara, his expression unreadable. You knew about Daejung before you walked in here. I've known for 6 months, she confirmed. I hired forensic accountants to trace every transaction. His embezzlement was clumsy once you knew what to look for. But I needed him to feel safe. Needed him to think he'd won. Needed him to be here today when I exposed him. You used me as bait. I used us both as bait. Kamara stood slowly, her hand resting on her stomach where their son was growing. He needed to believe we were still enemies, needed to think the erasure had worked. Otherwise, he would have run before I could trap him. Manshik moved toward her, each step deliberate. You manipulated everyone in this building, including me. Yes, you destroyed my empire. I rebuilt it. She met him halfway across the room, her chin tilted up in defiance. I saved it from the man who was slowly bleeding it dry. I saved you from the council who would have used that marriage to control you. I saved our son from inheriting a legacy built on lies and betrayal. Our son. Manshik's hand reached out, hovering near her stomach but not touching. Not yet. You were pregnant when I erased you. The IVF worked faster than expected. Kamara placed her hand over his, guiding it to rest against the curve of her belly where their child was sleeping. I found out 2 weeks after you threw me away. I could have told you. Could have used the pregnancy to stop the erasure. But I knew if Dae-jung discovered I was carrying your child, he would have killed me to eliminate the competition. Manshik's fingers spread across her stomach, trembling slightly. So you disappeared, built an empire in secret, and came back powerful enough that no one could touch you. No one could touch us. She covered his hand with both of hers. This isn't just about revenge, Manshik. It's about giving our son a future where he doesn't have to choose between love and power, where he can be both brutal and tender, where he can be human, the way I never was, the way you're about to become. Manshik pulled his hand away suddenly, stepping back like she'd burned him. I need proof. Kamara had expected this, had prepared for this moment during every sleepless night in cheap motels, during every morning she'd spent being sick while building shell companies, during every ultrasound she'd attended alone. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a folder, setting it on the volcanic rock desk between them. Medical records, she said quietly. DNA analysis from the IVF clinic. Ultrasounds showing developmental markers that match your genetic profile. Legal documents proving conception date. Everything you need to confirm he's yours. Manshik opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. His eyes scanned page after page of medical jargon, genetic markers, probability percentages. When he reached the ultrasound images, he stopped. The latest one showed a profile view, a tiny nose, a curve of forehead, fingers curled near a face that was still forming. He looks like you, Kamara whispered. The doctors say his bone structure is already developing with Korean features. But he'll have my skin, my hair. He'll be both of us. Manshik traced the outline of the baby's head with one finger, the gesture so gentle it made Kamara's chest ache. I thought I was sterile. You were told you were sterile. She moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. Your medical records from childhood show blunt force trauma to your abdomen. The doctors assumed it would affect fertility. But the IVF proved them wrong. The blunt force trauma? Manshik's voice went flat. My father did that, when I was 8 years old, the night I refused to watch him execute a traitor. Kamara had read the reports, had seen the x-rays from 3 decades ago showing fractured ribs, internal bleeding, damage that should have killed him. She'd also read the psychiatric evaluation that followed, a boy who'd learned to bury his humanity so deep that no one could ever hurt him again. Your father wanted to break you, she said softly. Instead, he created the Ghost King, someone who couldn't be threatened, couldn't be controlled, couldn't be touched. Until you. Until me. Manshik closed the folder, his jaw clenched tight. The council will come for you. When they discover what you've done, when they realize you've taken control of the organization, they'll send people to eliminate the threat. Let them try. Kamara's smile was all edges. I've spent 7 months buying up their debts. Park Jin-woo owes $17 million to a private equity firm that I now own. The San Francisco faction's shipping routes go through ports I control. Every single council member who tried to manipulate you is now financially entangled with companies that answer to me. If they come for me, they destroy themselves. Manshik stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You didn't just buy my company. You bought the entire Korean underworld's American operations. I bought our future. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. I bought freedom from men who think power is inherited instead of earned. I bought the right for our son to choose his own path instead of having it chosen for him. By becoming more ruthless than all of them combined. I learned from the best. Her fingers curled into his shirt, You taught me that mercy is a luxury reserved for people who can afford weakness. I can't afford it. Not when I'm protecting him. Manshik's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You've thought of everything. Not everything. Kamara's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't account for how much I'd miss you. How many nights I'd lie awake wondering if you were okay. If Dae-jung had convinced you I was the enemy. If you'd moved on. Forgotten about me. I didn't forget. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, their breath mingling in the space between them. I couldn't. Every morning I woke up reaching for you. Every night I'd stand at these windows wondering where you were, wondering if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. You did. Her hands slid up his chest to rest against his shoulders. But I used that mistake to build something better. Something that can't be taken away by councils or betrayals or men who think women are collateral damage. I'm sorry. The words came out rough, scraped raw from somewhere deep inside him. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I chose duty over love. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you. I didn't need you to fight for me. Kamara pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. I needed you to teach me how to fight for myself, and you did. Everything you showed me about power, about strategy, about surviving in a world that wants to destroy you, I used it all. So don't apologize for making me stronger. What do you need from me now? I need you to choose. She stepped back, putting space between them that felt like a canyon. Dae-jung is gone. The council is neutralized. The company is mine. You have no empire left to protect, no throne to defend, no reason to keep being the Ghost King. What are you saying? I'm saying you're free. Kamara's voice cracked on the word. You can walk away, disappear like you taught me to do, start over somewhere far from here with a new name and a new life. No one would blame you. Manshik's eyes narrowed. Is that what you want? For me to leave? I want you to have a choice. For the first time in your life, I want you to choose what you want instead of what you think you owe the organization. I choose you. No hesitation, no calculation. I choose you and our son and whatever future you've built in the shadows. I choose to stop being the Ghost King and start being a man who's allowed to love something more than power. Kamara pulled another folder from her blazer, this one thicker than the first. She set it on the desk beside the medical records, her expression unreadable. Open it, she said. Manshik did. Inside were legal documents, death certificates, passport applications, financial statements showing accounts drained to zero. Every page bore his name, Manshik Kang, the Ghost King, the man who'd built an empire from blood and secrecy. Every page marked him as deceased. What is this? His voice was barely audible. This is your erasure. Kamara moved to stand beside him again, pointing to specific documents. 3 weeks ago, Manshik Kang died in a car accident outside Savannah. His body was cremated, his assets were liquidated, his identity was purged from every database I could access. As of right now, you don't exist. Manshik felt the floor tilt beneath him. You killed me. I freed you. She turned to face him fully, her brown eyes fierce. The council can't threaten a dead man. The FBI can't prosecute someone who doesn't exist. Every enemy you've made, every debt you owe, every contract with your name on it, it's all void. You're legally a ghost now. And the man standing in front of you? Is someone new? Kamara pulled out a passport from the folder, holding it up for him to see. The photo was his. Digitally altered just enough to pass inspection, but the name was different. James Park, American citizen, born in Seattle, no criminal record, no ties to organized crime, a completely clean slate. James Park has a trust fund established by a distant relative, she continued. Enough money to live comfortably, but not ostentatiously. He has a master's degree in business administration, a clean credit history, an apartment waiting for him in Portland. Everything he needs to start over. Manshik took the passport, staring at the name that wasn't his. You erased me the same way I erased you. With one difference. Kamara's hand came up to rest against his cheek. I left you an exit, a way to choose life instead of legacy, freedom instead of power. What about you? His hand covered hers, holding it against his face. What about the Obsidian Group? The Obsidian Group will be dissolved within 6 months. I've already filed the paperwork. Every legitimate asset will be sold. Every employee will receive severance packages that are triple the industry standard. Every illegal operation will be shut down permanently. You're destroying it. I'm ending it. Her thumb brushed across his cheekbone. This empire was built on your father's cruelty and maintained by your ruthlessness. Our son doesn't need that inheritance. He needs parents who chose love over legacy, who chose each other over power. Manshik's other hand came up to rest on her stomach again, feeling the subtle movement beneath his palm. Their son, their future, their reason to walk away from everything they'd built. James Park, he said slowly, testing the name. Sounds like someone boring, someone normal, someone who works a regular job and comes home to his family every night. Someone who gets to be happy. Kamara leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. Someone who gets to watch his son grow up, someone who doesn't have to hide what he loves. And what does James Park do for work? She smiled against his shirt. Whatever he wants. He could teach business strategy, consult for tech startups, write a novel about corporate espionage. The point is, he gets to choose. Manshik tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. And Kamara Wesby? What happens to her? Kamara Wesby will finish dismantling the Obsidian Group. She'll make sure every person who ever worked for this organization gets compensated fairly. She'll ensure that every illegal operation is shut down without anyone getting killed. And then she'll disappear too. To Portland. To wherever James Park is. Her smile widened. I hear Portland has excellent schools, great coffee, rain that reminds you of Atlanta but without all the criminal syndicates. You've thought of everything. I had 7 months and a growing baby to motivate me. Kamara's hands slid around his waist, pulling him closer. I thought about every possible future, every scenario where we could be together without constantly looking over our shoulders. This is the only way, Manshik. Complete erasure, complete reinvention, complete freedom. He kissed her then, not with the desperation of their first kiss, but with the tenderness of someone who'd finally learned that strength didn't require brutality. That power didn't require isolation, that love wasn't a weakness to be exploited, but a foundation to be built upon. When they broke apart, both breathless, Manshik rested his hand over their son's heartbeat. What's his name? Our son's name? Yes. Kamara's smile turned soft, almost shy. I was thinking Alexander. It means defender of mankind. Someone who protects people instead of destroying them. Alexander Park. Manshik tested the name, feeling how it fit in his mouth. How it felt foreign and perfect all at once. He'll have a better life than either of us had. He'll have a boring, normal, beautiful life. Kamara's voice cracked with emotion. He'll go to good schools and have birthday parties and never wonder if his father is going to come home. He'll be safe. Because his mother is terrifying. Because his parents chose him over everything else. They stood in the boardroom until the sun began to set, painting Atlanta in shades of gold and amber. The city they'd ruled from the shadows was still there, still alive, still ruthless. But it no longer owned them. Kamara was the first to break the silence. There's one more thing. She pulled the final item from her blazer, a simple white gold wedding band. No diamonds, no ornamentation, just a circle of metal that caught the dying light. You kept it, Manshik whispered, recognizing the ring he'd given her the night before the erasure. The night they'd gone to the IVF clinic. The night they'd promised each other a future neither believed would actually happen. I kept everything that mattered. Kamara held the ring between them. I kept this. I kept our son. I kept every memory of who we were before power corrupted everything we touched. Manshik took the ring from her fingers, holding it up to examine the inscription inside, always 3 steps ahead, words he'd had engraved as a joke about her brilliance, words that had become prophetic. James Park doesn't have a wedding ring, he observed. Not yet. Kamara's smile was radiant despite the tears streaming down her face. But he could, if he wanted one. If he was ready to promise someone that he'd spend the rest of his life being boring and normal and gloriously human. Manshik dropped to one knee right there on the volcanic rock floor, still holding the ring. Kamara Wesby, or whoever you're about to become, will you marry a dead man who's learning how to live? Only if he promises to never, ever teach our son how to build a criminal empire. I promise. He slid the ring onto her finger, the fit still perfect after 7 months. I promise to teach him how to love instead, how to choose people over power, how to be brave enough to walk away from everything that doesn't serve his soul. Kamara pulled him to his feet, kissing him with 7 months of loneliness and terror and fierce, stubborn hope. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully set. The city below them was waking up for the night, neon signs flickering to life, people moving through streets that held 1,000 secrets. But up on the 50th floor, 2 ghosts were finally becoming visible. Manshik gathered the folders, the passports, the death certificates, the wedding ring that now belonged on both their hands. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. Kamara linked her fingers through his. First flight to Portland. James Park and his very pregnant wife starting their boring, beautiful life. What about tonight? Tonight we say goodbye to who we were. She led him toward the door, toward the elevator that would take them down from the tower they'd built together. We say goodbye to the Ghost King and the woman who conquered him. We say goodbye to the Obsidian Group and everything it represented. They walked out of the boardroom hand in hand, leaving the volcanic rock desk and the floor-to-ceiling windows and the city that sprawled below like a glittering threat. The elevator was empty, the entire building evacuated after the day's chaos. As they descended 50 floors, Manshik watched their reflection in the polished doors. A Korean man with a new name and an uncertain future. A black woman with a crimson blazer and a belly full of hope. 2 people who'd destroyed each other and rebuilt something better from the ashes. I love you, he said quietly. 3 words he'd never spoken before. 3 words he'd been taught were weakness. I know. Kamara squeezed his hand. I counted on it. It's what made all of this possible. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto a lobby that smelled like marble and possibility. Outside, the Georgia night was warm and forgiving. A car was waiting, not a limousine or a bulletproof SUV, but a simple rental sedan that would take them to a hotel where James Park had a reservation. Tomorrow they would fly to Portland. Tomorrow they would start over. Tomorrow they would learn how to be people instead of players in a game that only ended in blood. But tonight, they were still Manshik and Kamara. Still the Ghost King and the woman who'd outsmarted him. Still 2 people who'd chosen love over legacy and found that it was the most powerful choice of all. As they drove away from the Obsidian Group for the last time, Manshik looked back at the tower. 50 floors of secrets and silence. A monument to everything he'd been. No regrets? Kamara asked softly. Not a single one. He placed his hand over hers on her stomach, feeling Alexander kick against their palms. I spent 30 years building an empire. Now I get to spend the rest of my life building a family. That's far more terrifying. Good thing I've got a partner who thinks 10 steps ahead. Kamara laughed. The sound free and genuine and full of promise. Good thing you finally learned to trust someone other than yourself. They drove through Atlanta's streets, two ghosts becoming human, two enemies becoming lovers, two people who'd learned that the greatest power wasn't in controlling others, but in freeing yourself. The Obsidian Group would be dissolved within 6 months. The council would spend years trying to find the man who disappeared. The FBI would close their investigation into a dead man who could never face charges. But in Portland, James and Kamara Park would raise their son in a house with a white picket fence and coffee shops on every corner. They'd attend PTA meetings and birthday parties. They'd teach Alexander that love was worth more than legacy, that choosing humanity over power was the bravest thing anyone could do. And sometimes, late at night when Alexander was sleeping, they'd tell each other the story of the Ghost King and the woman who conquered him. They'd remember the volcanic rock desk and the boardroom on the 50th floor. They'd remember what they'd sacrificed to be together. But they'd never, ever go back. Because some empires deserve to fall. Some legacies deserve to end. Some ghosts deserve to finally rest. And some loves deserve to be more than just survival. They deserve to be life. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, if you believe love is worth more than power, let me know in the comments. Are you Team Kamara or Team Manshik? Drop your city below and hit that subscribe button, because every story I tell is about people who choose themselves over everything the world says they should be. See you in the next chapter.